be. Hello? Come on in.
Yes, Denise.
I read John chapter 5.
You what?
I read it. John 5.
That's right. Good for you. What did you like most about it?
There's a whole lot. But the most thing I liked about it was when he confronted those that had questioned
Uh-huh.
why did he kill the guy on the Sabbath.
Uh-huh.
Okay? And so I read some commentaries on that, and it talked about why he did it and how we react to things that we do on the Sabbath. So I'm a phenomenal reader. So when I read the Bible, I look for commentaries to help me
Yeah.
understand it.
So, do you think he was wrong? Well, the Jews thought he was. The Jews thought he was.
Yeah. But there was a lot of things that they practiced at that time. And they were talking about the law of Moses. And for that reason,
Go Eagles. I mean, Bills.
I saw a shirt that reminded, I just get for you and Tony, it said, go local ball sport team.
There you go. Tony's out picking up Akash.
Yeah, I saw the text after everything was settled.
But he's a real cricket fan, you know.
Yeah, we talk cricket. Yeah, I like cricket too. I support the Kingsmen of Punjab. You know, who's your favorite?
That sounds fine to me.
No, you don't want to be a Punjabi fan. They're not very good, apparently.
Okay.
I only found that out after I chose them.
You got to root for the home team.
Yeah. He likes, I think he likes the Mumbai Lions. Is that true?
Yep.
I think that might be who.
This is Akash.
Yeah.
Hello, Sue. Dave, I sent you that picture because there was a whole museum display featuring Malcolm Wells.
Oh, wow.
And he was really, you know, and I went to the opening reception for it on Friday.
Oh, cool.
And
he talked about.
I was there.
So he has a book that
The
he
Church
does
of Christ building was
commentaries
his
on the New
first
Testament,
building.
and one of
Wow.
them was the commentary
So
on the book of
from there
John.
you get all kinds of,
Oh.
but
Yeah. So
kinda get
I
his
have a lot of
vibe.
those
Yeah,
books
yeah, yeah.
that
So
he
he went to
wrote,
Harding? Is that where?
and
No,
one of them
did
that
not.
he did was on the
He went,
Grace.
he started
What does
attending
grace
here.
mean?
Oh, wow.
And it was called the
actually
Grace
baptized.
Awakening.
I don't know if he stuck with
And
it.
so I
Grace Awakening.
Oh, wow.
Grace Awakening.
That's cool.
My sister has a whole bunch of, or has had a whole bunch of Charles Swindoll stuff.
Like, I thought
I think
maybe
it's
it was like
Charles Chuck Swindoll,
considered a poem from the 60s or something like
but I've not gotten into it. But I mean, like maybe 10 copies. I mean, 10 different texts.
I have quite a few books by him. So the Grace Awakening was one of the books that kind of touched me. And then what he said in the book about the book of John in chapter 5, it was like, okay. And how we always say, well, you can't do this because the day is the Sabbath and the day of rest. And da-da-da-da-da. And I kind of grew up with that. It's something, you can't be doing that. You can't do no laundry, you can't do no cooking. So I was like, And then he talked about, Jesus talked about John. And John, how John foretold who he was. And that he was coming. So that kind of sparked.
Oh, good. Hey, Tony, how's your mom?
What's that?
How's your mom?
Very good. Yeah, it was, I'll speak for her. It really wasn't too bad. I know she's happy about it.
But she's home
Yeah,
tonight?
yeah.
How long did it take?
Well, the surgery itself was only about 40 minutes, but, you know, the whole thing was
Yeah,
half hour.
half a day. You got to be there about 2 hours before, and then you have to wait until they're satisfied that you have recovered satisfactorily, and the next thing you know, it's all day.
But it was best case scenario, really. You know.
Good. And where was it, Cooper?
No, it's Martin Virtua off 73.
Okay.
Bill, we're live now.
We're live, we can start, go?
We're ready, yeah.
All right. The text tonight is John chapter 5. And in verse 1 and 2 and 3, it talks about the man had been lame for 38 years. So my question for everyone here is, raise your hand if you can tell me, if you can share with us what you were doing 38 years ago. And the person who gets to pass on that is Elizabeth.
I was in college. I don't know if that's specific enough. But
It's as specific as you want to make it.
What year are we talking about?
38 years ago would have been in 85.
What year?
85.
Oh, you went to college in 85. I guess you were, yeah. I just started Baptist that year.
You started Baptist? Oh, Baptist Regional?
Baptist Regional, yeah. I had been a Baptist for some time, but I started Baptist High School. And then that didn't really stick.
We're thankful for that. Sue, what were you doing 38 years ago? Were you burying the dead? Oh, mortgage company. I heard mortuary company.
People were paying off loans pretty quickly, and I was trying to get all the mortgages and everything done and back to them. It's a lot of work.
All right.
The interest rates are really low, so.
Then, because they were, you would think people would not be paying off mortgages. If the interest rates were low, they would be keeping their mortgages. And if they don't have low rates, they'd be buying new mortgages. Fascinating. Okay, let's get started. We're in John chapter 5. Hello, Joanne. Interesting thing about this chapter, you may have this if you'd like.
Thank you.
Interesting thing about this chapter is in this chapter we'll find out that this is the third sign. Anybody remember what the first and second signs were in the Gospel of John? What were the first two signs? Good. Second sign.
I got one.
was there a blind man in there healed?
That's later.
The gentleman whose son was ill.
Yes, that's right. The official's son. That's an interesting story because he took the initiative. He was desperate for help. That's quite a contrast to what we're going to read here about that, because this guy did not have any hope. Let's listen to the first couple of verses. Now, after this, we don't know how long after this is. In the last verse in the 4th chapter is, this was now the second sign that Jesus did when he had come from Judea to Galilee. You think about it, in chapter 1, he's in Jerusalem. In chapter 2, he's in Galilee. Then he's in Cana. Then he's in Galilee. Chapter 3, we think he's in Jerusalem. It doesn't really say, but the flow of the text indicates that. In chapter 4, he's back in Galilee. heading towards Samaria, and then in Galilee, finishes in Galilee. And then in chapter 5, after this, there was a feast of the Jews, and Jesus went up to Jerusalem. Now, if you're what's the science for studying maps? Yeah. If you're into that, north is this way, and it's Judea, and then Samaria, and then Galilee, right? Everybody with me on that? Hi, Vivian. Or Virginia? Vivian.
Hi.
Where were you 38 years ago?
Where was I 38 years ago?
Uh-huh. What were you doing 38 years ago?
I don't know, I was here at Collingswood the other night.
It's fascinating. In verse 1, it says, and Jesus went up to Jerusalem. It's south of Galilee. And so he's really going down from a geographic point of view. But they all say up to Jerusalem because it was the holy city. In every case, they consider going up to Jerusalem because of the holy city. Now, there was in Jerusalem by the sheep gate a pool in Hebrew called Bethsaida, which had 5 porticos. And the interesting thing about this, that's been discovered by archaeologists, and it's as the text says. There lay a multitude of invalids, blind, lame, paralyzed, and then some authorities insert waiting for the moving of the water. So here's the pool. It's a large pool, and a lot of people there are waiting, kind of laying by the side of the water, and they're waiting for something to happen called the moving of the water. And first person in the pool gets healed. Now, here's a guy we don't know that yet. One man was there who'd also been ill for 38 years. That's why I asked the question, where were you 38 years ago?
I don't know, I'm bad at math. I mean, 1985, right?
1985.
I was a sophomore in high school.
Sophomore in high school? See, I'm getting people telling their age.
Sneaky.
Where were you?
I was in high school. I was a freshman. I was in Fort Worth, Texas.
Fort Worth Christian School. I thought you were in the 8th grade. Oh, that was, never mind. That would be you were a freshman in high school. So anyhow, one man was there who had been ill for 38 years. Now, what's unique about 38 years? I thought, how long do the Israelites take for them to leave Israel, leave Egypt and enter the promised land, or the land of Canaan? I thought that was 40 years. How come this says 38 years? This is a test. Not a trick question, this is a test. What?
Maybe they're not rounding up.
No. After it took, for the first 2 years, the Jews, the Israelites were asking Moses, we think you should send spies into the land to decide whether we can take this land or not. And how many spies went? 2 spies. What were the names of the 2 spies who went? Joshua and Caleb. That's right, Joshua and Caleb. And they came back, and what was their report to Moses? We can do it. Yeah, we can take these guys. We can take these guys. Even though they had cities, large cities, strong guys, big guys, and we're just tiny guys, but we got them outnumbered, but we can take them. And how did the Israelites react? Oh, no, we can't do it. And so what did God do? He said, I sent you up there. You sent two guys that I trust. They came back and said, yes, we can do it. And now you've said, no, we can't. So God said, for that, you will spend the next 38 years before you can enter the promised land. And oh, by the way, every single guy who is of age, whatever that means, is going to die. For 38 years, all the guys that were adults were dead. The people who weren't dead were the women and young guys who were now adults. So, when Jesus saw him and knew that he had been laying there for a long time, he said to him, do you want to be healed? Now, at this point, at this instant, it's important to think about this. When Jesus, were there just a few guys around the pool?
A lot, because he said he couldn't get to it. So.
That's right. It's a popular place. A lot of people laying around hoping to be the person who scrambles into the pool. And he's never successful. So Jesus walks up and he says, hey, you, do you want to be healed? Now, what's the response of this guy? The sick man answered him, sir, I have no man to put me into the pool when the water is troubled, and while I'm going, another steps down before me. Now, did this guy know who Jesus was? No, he did not. He did not know who Jesus was. So if you've been there laying 38 years and you see a guy you've never seen before come up and say, hey, you, how would you like to be healed? What would be your answer? What?
That's why I'm here.
That's why I'm here. Well, you can give the guy a benefit of the doubt, but you can also say, you think he's been asked that before? Or does he have any reason to trust Jesus? Because he has no idea who Jesus is, or why he should trust him, or why he should. So my first reading of this is, maybe like yours, is he didn't answer the question. He did not answer Jesus' question, which was a legitimate question. Do you want to be healed? And he said, he ducked the question. He didn't answer the question. What did he say? He offered an excuse. Now, and Jesus' response in verse 8, rise, take up your pallet and walk. Now, what did the guy do? And at once, the man was healed, and he took up his pallet and walked. Now, some questions come to my mind. How did he know that he was healed?
Probably feeling things he hadn't felt for 38 years.
In his legs?
Yeah.
Did he feel the strength kind of oozing up his legs? We don't know. The text doesn't say, but that's probably a good response. He felt the energy entering his body. But even if he has energy entering his body, what makes him think that he would have the balance to walk? I mean, I still have my legs, but it's very easy for me to lose my balance. That's why I carry around that cane, because I have trouble with balance. So that makes sense to me. So he got up, and at once. Now did the guy have faith in Jesus at that time? Got one guy who says no, Anybody else got an opinion about that?
Well, do you mean faith in Jesus that he could heal him, or faith in Jesus for who he was? I mean, I don't think he knew very much besides this guy just healed me, but I thought he was a prophet or something, who knows?
Who knows is the right answer. Yeah, Dave?
The amazing thing about this episode is that Jesus asked them, hey, do you want to be healed? And the obvious answer is yes, I want to be healed. But he doesn't do that. He reiterates his plan. He reiterates his failed attempts to bring about healing himself. And Jesus says, do you want to be healed? He doesn't even stick around for a response. He just says, take up your mat and walk. I mean, it's just, to me, it's just a demonstration of like, how as a Christian we need to live our lives. And I think so often when we think about, like, when I think about when I fail to follow through as a Christian, or how I struggle from day to day to day to live holy and righteously from moment to moment, it's because I'm just reiterating to God, like, I was planning on doing this, but then someone stepped in front of me.
Yeah.
Or I was planning on doing this, and then an obstacle. And Jesus says, no, just take up your mat and walk.
In this
Darren?
instance, he didn't need to have faith, he just had proof.
He felt no strength in his legs.
Yep, he just had proof.
So faith does or doesn't have any.
What's that?
Faith, what's the role of faith in this case?
In this case, there's no role.
It's a byproduct.
It comes after the proof.
If he had any faith, it had just been validated. Because he had the capability to do that. Okay. Now, yeah.
He has faith in God. He thinks the angels are stirring the waters, right? Isn't that the dealio?
Well, that's right. But he's got three guys between him and the water.
Right, but I mean, he must have some faith in the God and the supernatural, and he's in Jerusalem, so I assume that's Yahweh.
Wow.
And I assume he's.
He could have been dumped by his parents when he was 10 years old, too.
Yeah, that's true.
There's no indication that he was a thoughtful person, or more likely little bit of bitterness there because he was there after 38 years, and nobody has helped him. Nobody has offered him a healing of his legs or taken him to a doctor. No one's given him a cane to walk around. We don't know any of that. It's a very this is a net story. And the message, what's the message here? The message here is Jesus sees the guy, asks him a question. He doesn't answer him. He says, got an excuse here why this is not working. And Jesus heals him anyhow. And that's an important distinction. Jesus did not wait for him to say, yes, I have faith in you. I know you can do it. Jesus healed him immediately.
You want to hear a comment?
From the doctor.
I remember reading one commentary about this, and it kind of made sense too, is this is all the guy knew. And he was probably making some kind of income from begging. And I think like a lot of us, there's a better way, and we just don't go that way. And he might have been in that kind of situation where he wasn't saying yes, even though he might have thought it was impossible. But also, what's he going to do now? Like, it's funny, Jesus bumps into him later and says, hey, keep going sinning, or you might have something bad happen.
Yeah, we're gonna get there.
Which is interesting why he may not want to say yes to that, because okay, this is who he was.
Yeah.
And Jesus wants to change him.
Bill, I was going to say, it seems like Jesus required
Yeah, think about in the previous chapter in Galilee, here's an official, and he's got a son who's near death, and he had heard about Jesus, and so he says, I hope that if I go there, this guy Jesus can heal my son. That was hoping faith. But there's no time for that. There's no indication that he had any hope at all, because he didn't know who Jesus was and didn't know what it meant for him to say for him. What was Jesus really asking? Do I want to be healed? Well, of course, dummy. But what are the reasons why? Is there any reason why I should believe that you can help me? Okay, so just reading verse 9. Now that day was the Sabbath. Oh, was that a problem? Like, if you're a Jew and you start walking around, it's a problem. And it's especially a problem if you're the guy who is behind that healing.
You walk too far that day, it's probably.
Yeah, that's right. There was a certain distance you were allowed to walk, and that was all. And carrying the mat, yes.
Yeah, that was what I thought about too, thinking about the man, because there was a form of obedience in his response to Christ. He could have just jumped up and realized that there was something wrong and walked off and left the mat there.
Well, that's true.
He knew it was the Sabbath. So he took his mat.
He may or may not have known it was the Sabbath, because he's laying there. You think he goes to the synagogue?
Yeah, I'm assuming he's Jewish, so.
Well, that's right. But, we know what Sunday is, but that doesn't necessarily mean that how many people you see going to Walmart or to ShopRite on Sunday? They know that it's a day off, but that's about all that matters. They're going to shopping because that's their, and they have no interest in church or belief or the Bible. Okay, so the Jews said to the man who was cured, "It is the Sabbath. It is not lawful for you to carry your pallet." But the man answered them, "The man who healed me said to me, 'Take up your pallet and walk.'" So he followed his instructions. So we see no indication that he gave any thanks or recognition to Jesus for what Jesus had done. Maybe there was some, one of the Gospels is Jesus heals 9 lepers. And how many of them thanked him? 1, that's right, just 1. There's no evidence here that this guy showed any appreciation. Yet, anyhow. So let's talk about the Jews. Who are the Jews? That in my mind, it raises the question of who these Jews are. Are they the Pharisees or what? And so I'll just make it easy for us and say that there were groups of people who opposed Jesus from the very first. This is the first time that we have any indication that there is opposition to Jesus. Clearly in chapter 4 and chapter 2, there's no opposition. So there were the Pharisees. Can we name other Sadducees? And what? It's easy to remember that name, right? Because they were so sad, you see. How many times have you heard that before? Who else? Pharisees, Sadducees, what else?
There's always like a vague group that's called the teachers of the law. Teachers of the law.
Teachers of the law. Yes, yes. Who studied the law, that's right, yes.
Maybe the zealots, or no, the zealots or not?
Well, the zealots, yes. There were the zealots. The zealots were the guys who were what was their interest?
To overthrow Rome.
Yes, they were interested in overthrowing Rome. That's right. Was one of the apostles a zealot? That's right. And any other group that you can think of?
Well, I was thinking rabbi, but I don't know if that's the
Well,
same as
sure.
teachers of the law.
Well, Herodians, and if you know something about them, tell me, because I don't know who they are. I know the name, I know they were Herodians, but I don't know anything about them. What else? Sanhedrin? Sanhedrin, who is the Sanhedrin? When it says Sanhedrin, they were the leaders. There were about 70 of them who were the leaders of the Jews. Mostly older guys. We would make a very crude reference to them being our elders, older and wiser, but having some considerable amount of power. And we'll find out more about the Sanhedrin when Jesus is arrested. Anybody else you can think of? Scribes. And who were they?
They would write things down, but in the process they would write a lot. Not everybody could write.
Not everybody could write.
They were maybe the court reporters, they were papers, but they were very knowledgeable because of that.
That's right. That's right. That's right. I've got a list here. Who were they besides that? The Levites, the Essenes. Just now, each one of these groups had their own agenda for what their position was. But they were consistent in their opposition to Jesus. That's why I invented a term for myself in talking about this. They were the umbrella group. So the Jews, by the way, the Jews are mentioned 70 times in the book of John, but I never was able to find a formal definition of what a Jew is, except they opposed people who did what? Healed on the Sabbath. They were firm believers in following the rule of you got to stay home on the Sabbath. You can't go to Walmart. You can't go shopping. You can't go to the beach. You got to stay home on the Sabbath. The Jews, you read about more about, the Jews are mentioned more often than any other group. And he said, the man who healed me said to me, take up your pallet and walk. Does he still know who Jesus was? They asked him, who is the man who said to you, take up your pallet and walk? Now the man who had been healed did not know who it was, for Jesus had withdrawn, as there was a crowd in the place. Afterwards, Jesus found him in the temple and said to him, see, you are well, sin no more, that nothing worse may befall you. May befall you. Now, why did Jesus tell him that?
Well, it sounds like a warning of, look, if you continue doing what you're doing, you're going to be back where you were.
You might get your legs broken again. Maybe he was a bad guy and lost his talent there. Who knows? But the implication here is that the guy was a bad guy for some reason or another, not stated. The man went away and told the Jews that it was Jesus who had healed him. And this is why the Jews, once again, the Jews persecuted Jesus, because he did this on the Sabbath. But Jesus answered them, my Father is working still, and I am working. Now, verse 18 is a very key verse in the text because it says, "This is why the Jews sought all the more to kill him," kill Jesus. And why? He not only broke the Sabbath, but also called God his Father, making himself equal with God. So as we go through John, and probably the Synoptics, you find these groups, one or more of these groups, in opposition to Jesus. Typically, when Jesus, the situation arises where Jesus does something that offends them on the Sabbath day. And that's what happened here. They were being offended by what Jesus had done. He broke the Sabbath. How did he break the Sabbath? Because he healed the guy. So it doesn't mention that the guy broke the Sabbath. It's Jesus is the bad guy, but also called God his Father, making himself equal with God. So we see what John does throughout this book. He is, through the signs he does, he is establishing his deity, that he is the Son of God. Lots of passages. And this if we were to go in here, if I keep going, Jesus said to them, "Truly, truly, I say to you, the Son can do nothing of his own accord, but only what he sees the Father doing." He's claiming a relationship between himself and God. There's deity. Yes, Chief?
Pretty neat too how he says, "My Father has been working till now, and I have been working." Kind of like when he says also at a different time, Sabbath was made,
For man.
kind of like, you guys are mortals, men. I mean, he's mortal too, but you guys are men. You have a Sabbath. God does not take a Sabbath, and neither do I.
Okay?
I just think that's cool. I had never thought that. That God works on the Sabbath, and he works on the Sabbath too.
That,
But you guys don't work on the Sabbath because you are men.
interesting observation there, because what happened in Genesis? He rested. He rested. I hadn't made that connection, but that's a good point. For the Father loves the Son and shows him all that he himself is doing, and greater works than these will he show. Now, what's happening there? That you may marvel. What is Jesus giving a hint of? He's giving a hint of greater works so that you might marvel. What kind of a greater hint would there be than healing a guy who's been lame for 38 years? That's right. Exactly right. The NIV says, "I'm going to be doing things that will amaze you." That's not the way this is translated, but in the NIV it's that it will amaze you. For the Father raises the dead and gives them life so that, the answer, so the Son gives life to whom he will. And he did. He did that in a couple of instances. The Father judges no one, but given all judgment to the Son. And it goes on here. In verse 24, "Truly, truly, I say to you, he who hears my word and believes him who sent me has eternal life. He does not come into judgment, but is passed from death to life." Is this a promise that we can claim as Christians? Is this a promise that we can claim? I don't hear a strong yes.
Yes.
Exactly. Promise from death to life. This gets into the theology. Yes. I'm a believer in Jesus Christ, so I have a promise of eternal life. When I die, I will be with Jesus eternally. He does not come into judgment, but is passed from death to life. Truly, truly, I say to you, the hour is coming and now is when the dead will hear the voice of the Son of God. Once again, a claim of deity. And those who hear will live. For the Father has life in himself, so has he granted the Son to have life in himself. He's given him authority to execute judgment, and so on. Do not marvel at this. The hour is coming when all who are in the tombs will hear his voice. Someday the dead are going to rise. And come forth those who have done good to the resurrection of life, and those who have done evil to the resurrection of judgment. And so he goes on here making assertions about his claim of deity. So the challenge here, I don't think there's any reason to keep going here. So what I have here is the healing of the man lame. But we also have a man non-healing of the spiritual body. You think he's listening to this conversation? You think he's having any reason to believe that this guy has anything to do about his spiritual life been changed because of this action?
The warning that he gave.
Warning that he gave, okay.
Yeah, but I don't think Jesus is saying, look, if you keep doing this, my power's gonna fail. I think the guy walks for the rest of his life, but just my opinion, but the sin, Jesus says, hey, there's something greater. What you're messing with is something greater than just laying on a mat your whole life and by the pool of Bethesda.
I think you're on the point. David, because the heading I wrote down was the healing of the physical body has nothing to do with the healing of the spiritual body and mind. So that's the non-healing part of this whole thing. And we have no evidence that the guy responded in that way at all, which was completely different than the response of the official son and completely different than the man born blind in chapter 9. Different kinds of situations. This guy comes across as a guy who, wow, I can walk, but he shows no appreciation or understanding or interest in having any kind of a spiritual change in his life. It's an important point. Okay. Let's see, what else do I want to say? I have some notes about who the Pharisees were. Pharisees were part of the opposition party. There are five claims that Jesus makes in this chapter. In verse 19 to 21, what does he do? What's the claim? What's the claim in 19 to 21? Someone read that? What does Jesus claim about himself?
You want me to read 5:19 to 21?
Sure.
Jesus gave them this answer, I tell you the truth, the Son can do nothing by himself. He can only do what he sees his Father doing, because whatever the Father does, the Son also does. For the Father loves the Son and shows him all he does. Yes, to your amazement, he will show him even greater things than these. For just as the Father raises the dead and gives them life, even so the Son gives life to whom he is pleased to give it.
Does the works of God. Second, in verse 20, what does he say about his relationship to God? The Father loves the Son. And in verse 22, verse 22 and 27, what has the Father done there?
In 22 it says the Father judges no one. He's entrusted the judgment to the Son.
Son, authority, to judge.
Which to the Pharisees must have been a real blow, because that's what they saw their rule as. Arbitrary, kind of like
That's
a
right.
judge
Yeah.
enforces the law. That's what they were doing.
Yeah. So they're interested in doing, that's right.
Yeah. He said, no, that's ultimately my job.
Kind of
And
funny, the
they brought
Pharisees,
it. What's that?
the Pharisees also made up their own laws.
Oh, yeah,
Tell them
yeah,
God.
exactly. And he tells them that too.
And that whole Sabbath thing, that wasn't God's rules, that was what they made into
Yeah.
their own rules about
Mhm.
distances and all the distortions.
Yeah, all God required was that we take rest.
Right.
That we had to not turn the light on or whatever. Right, exactly.
And verse,
Jesus was saying, God and I do good on the Sabbath,
Yeah,
and that's what's okay to do.
yeah.
and what happens in verse 21? The Father
Raises the dead.
Raises the dead.
gives life. To the Son. And then lastly, he claims, and this is interesting, in verse 30. Verse 30. The claim that Jesus makes in verse 30. God sent me. This is a deal that's very hard for the Jews to accept, is that I'm doing the works of God because God sent me to do it. I'm not doing them on my authority, I'm doing on the authority of God. And that really is a hard thing for them to swallow. It's a hard thing for us to swallow, that Jesus is doing the works of God. So he's the man in control, he's the God in control, and we should be submitting to his will. Okay, I think that's it. Now, I think I had one or two other things. Yes. The question is there a question that's relevant for us? Is there a question here that's relevant for us?
I was just thinking, the man who's healed, he is a mirror image of the Pharisees. They see what's going on. There's no change spiritually. There's no acknowledgement spiritually. There's no, I mean, they still want to do the old thing and just lay around the pool and wait for the angel wings to stir the pot. And they want to do it that way. And Jesus says, no, this is the way it's going to be done. This is the way it was supposed to be done. And I'm here to kind of reset that.
I'm resetting it.
Yeah.
I'm changing the rules.
Use those words, but
That's right. That's right. So the question is he asked the lame man, do you want to be healed? Do you want to get well? That question is relevant to us too. Do we want to be healed? How do we feel about our lives? Would we like to have Jesus working in our lives, healing us from our worries and our doubts and our feelings of being saved? That's a question that we have to address. As Christians here in this room, we've all said yes. We've said yes to Jesus Christ. We want you to keep us going. We are taking you at your word. We want you to heal our spiritual needs. And that's the message that I get from this text. Anybody else? Okay. All right. Next week it's chapter 6. This is the third sign, and the interesting thing about this shows Jesus as the master over time. If you've been laying in that position for 38 years, then your legs have atrophied, there's no muscle function at all, but Jesus healed you, and now you can walk. He's master over time. Any questions or comments? Thank you for your time, folks.
Okay. Be healed. Not always the answer you think. Number 590. Does it seem presumptuous for us to say Jesus is our friend? He didn't seem to think so. He's the one that said, I've called you friends. Okay, number 590. Okay, let's, before I sing, let's go through the announcements. Ladies' Home Bible Study is tomorrow night at Brenda Bush's home, 7 p.m. Ladies' Hymn Sing is coming up this Saturday. Ladies need to pre-register, and Vivian can help you with that. Pittman Church is taking a turn hosting this event along with Collingswood and Camden. It's at 1 p.m. this Saturday, and we're going to help out by bringing some food items. Junior and senior high retreat is at Camp Manatawny this weekend, so I'm hoping we don't see the teens at church this weekend because they'll be at camp worshiping and getting encouraged and challenged. And any news on that or anything?
Just on that, so we're trying to take care of like how do people get there.
Yes.
So we teamed up with Manny at Pittman, who does most of the youth group. They have a very small youth group right now, so we're going to combine the trip there and back.
Okay.
Manny's going to drive that same van that we took up to the men's retreat.
Oh, wow.
And combine it all and try to start to build some community there.
Great, great. Okay, so they probably have room for another young person or two. Even. Plenty. Faye had her eye procedure on Tuesday. It went well. Got to see her today. Her eye pressure is down in that eye. They have to do one eye at a time, but she's been suffering with this, not for 38 years, but for a long time. And she's gotten some relief, and she is so happy about that and relieved. She's at home recovering, trying to take it easy, but we're thankful for that news. Is there other news or announcements? Anything I've left out? All right, very good. Glad to see a baby here. All right. Number 590. Jesus is all the world to me, my life, my joy, my all. He is my strength from day to day. Without him I would fall. When I am sad, to him I go. No other one can cheer me so. When I am sad, he makes me glad. He's my friend. 3. Jesus is all the world to me. I want no better friend. I trust him now, I'll trust him when life's fleeting days shall end. Beautiful life with such a friend. Beautiful life that has no end. Eternal life, eternal joy. He's my friend. Hold to God's unchanging hand, 613. I remember being young once and laughing at these dumb old songs. They weren't dumb, I was. These are substantial, folks. It's easy to make fun, but I tell you, there's real life in these words. Time is filled with swift transition. Naught of earth unmoved can stand. Build your hopes on things eternal. Hold to God's unchanging hand. Hold to God's unchanging hand. Hold to God's unchanging hand. Build your hopes on things eternal. Hold to God's unchanging hand. Trust in him who will not leave you, whatsoever years may bring. If by earthly friends forsaken, still more closely to him cling. You've got to hold to God's unchanging hand. Hold to God's unchanging hand. Build your hopes on things eternal. Hold to God's unchanging hand. When your journey is completed, if to God you have been true, fair and bright your home in glory, your enraptured soul will view. You'd have to hold to God's unchanging hand.